Inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, sealed behind 5 relieving chambers of solid granite and reached only through a passage too narrow for 2 men to pass, sits a box. Egyptologists call it a sarcophagus. It has never held a body. No lid has ever been found. No inscription marks it as belonging to any pharaoh. What it does have is granite walls tuned, almost by accident it seems, to a resonant frequency near 438 hertz, a fact first measured by acoustic researchers in the 1990s and never explained by the standard account of what this room was for. The official answer has not changed in over a century. The Great Pyramid was a tomb, built for Khufu, its granite chosen for permanence and status, its chambers empty because grave robbers took everything centuries ago. That answer works for the outer story. It does not work for the inside. A tomb does not need shafts angled precisely toward specific stars in the northern and southern sky, running through solid masonry to chambers that were never meant to be entered from outside. A tomb does not need its central chamber built entirely from pink granite hauled 500 miles down the Nile from Aswan, when limestone sat at the building site by the ton. A tomb does not need a lidless box acoustically tuned like an instrument. Robbers do not explain the granite, robbers do not explain the shafts, and robbers certainly do not explain what the chamber does when you strike that box and let the sound move through the room. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Start with the stone itself. Aswan granite is not a single mineral. It is a mix of quartz, feldspar, and mica, crystallized together under enormous heat and pressure deep in the earth long before any human civilization existed. Quartz has a property most people only encounter in a wristwatch or an old radio. Squeeze it, twist it, or subject it to certain kinds of pressure, and it generates a small electrical charge. Engineers call this the piezoelectric effect. It is not theoretical, and it is not new. It is why quartz crystals sit inside oscillators, sensors, and timing circuits in nearly every electronic device made today. The king's chamber, and everything above and below it, is built from a stone loaded with piezoelectric material. Estimates of the quartz content in the granite used at Giza run as high as 55% by volume. That is not a coincidence anyone chose to explain. It is a property of the rock the builders selected, out of every stone available to them, for the one room in the entire structure meant to sit at the pyramid's geometric heart. Then there is the water. Beneath the pyramid's foundation runs a natural water table, confirmed by 20th century surveys and referenced as far back as the work of the engineer who first proposed that the so-called subterranean chamber, the unfinished room cut directly into the bedrock beneath the pyramid, was never meant to be a burial space at all. That chamber has no sarcophagus, no decoration, and an unfinished floor with a pit cut straight down into the rock, a feature with no ceremonial explanation anyone has offered. Groundwater moving beneath a structure built from granite saturated with quartz creates the physical conditions for a phenomenon called the piezoelectric effect at scale. Pressure and flow generating a steady, low-level electrical charge that migrates upward through the stone. This is where the granite shafts stop looking decorative. The king's chamber has 2 narrow shafts, one running north, one running south, each roughly 8 inches square, running for hundreds of feet through solid masonry at a fixed angle. Officially, they are termed air shafts, meant for ventilation or for the pharaoh's soul to travel to the stars. But shafts do not need to be built to an exact degree of angular precision if their only job is to let air pass. Precision like that belongs to a system built to channel something specific, along a specific path, for a specific reason. The chamber above the king's chamber, and the 4 chambers stacked above that one, are called relieving chambers in every textbook, said to exist purely to distribute the weight of millions of tons of stone above the ceiling and keep it from collapsing inward. That function is real. Weight distribution is a legitimate engineering need in a structure this size. But the granite beams in those chambers show something a simple weight relief structure does not require: a layering that traps resonant energy rather than only redirecting mechanical load. Each course of stone acting as a reflective surface for vibration moving up through the granite from the chamber below. In 1998, the American engineer Christopher Dunn published a detailed technical case built on exactly this evidence, arguing that the Great Pyramid functioned as a resonating structure. His theory, known now as the Giza power plant hypothesis, proposes that the pyramid was tuned to convert ground vibration, drawn up through granite saturated with piezoelectric quartz and driven by the movement of subterranean water, into usable energy passed along the shaft system. Dunn is an engineer, not an archaeologist, and his theory sits outside the mainstream. It has never been tested inside the pyramid itself, because no excavation permit has ever authorized the kind of instrumentation that would confirm or rule it out. That absence of testing is not proof the theory is right. It is simply the reason no one can say for certain that it is wrong either. What can be said for certain is stranger than either extreme. In 2018, a team of physicists at ITMO University in Russia modeled the Great Pyramid's dimensions using electromagnetic simulation software, treating the structure as a physical antenna rather than a building. Their published results, which appeared in the Journal of Applied Physics, found that the pyramid's proportions cause it to concentrate electromagnetic energy at its base and inside its internal chambers, particularly at radio wavelengths that happen to align with the structure's own height. That paper does not claim the ancient Egyptians built a machine. It claims the geometry, whatever the reason behind it, produces a measurable electromagnetic effect that a structure this size should not produce by accident. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Put those three findings beside each other. A chamber built from stone that generates electricity under pressure. A water table beneath the foundation capable of supplying that pressure continuously. A geometry that modern physics confirms concentrates electromagnetic energy at specific points inside the structure. None of these facts are speculation. The quartz content is measured, the water table is confirmed, the electromagnetic modeling is published and peer-reviewed. What remains open, genuinely and completely open, is why. Why build a chamber this way? Why angle the shafts with this precision? Why choose granite over limestone for the one room that needed neither strength nor decoration to serve as a tomb? The Egyptians left no technical manual. What they left instead are texts describing the pyramid and structures like it in language that has always been read as purely religious. The pyramid texts, carved into chambers at Saqqara not long after Khufu's reign, describe the pharaoh's transformation inside the pyramid using words tied to light, ascension, and a body that becomes something other than flesh. Egyptologists read this as funerary poetry, a description of the soul's journey to the afterlife, and in a purely religious sense that reading holds. But strip away the theology for a moment and look only at the physical vocabulary. The texts describe a process happening inside a chamber. They describe transformation through contact with stone. They describe light emerging from within. Read as religious literature, none of this is unusual. Read alongside a chamber that generates measurable electromagnetic effects. The same words start to describe something that could have been observed rather than only imagined. This is where the honest limits have to be stated plainly. There is no inscription anywhere in Egypt that says the pyramid produced power, stored power, or transmitted power to anything else. No wire, no conduit, no device that could receive an electromagnetic signal has ever been recovered from the site or from any other structure of the period. If the pyramid functioned as any kind of energy system, its purpose, its output, and whatever received that output have left no trace that anyone has found or published. The theory explains why the chamber behaves the way instruments say it behaves. It does not explain what, if anything, the ancient builders were trying to power. There is also a simpler possibility worth holding alongside the dramatic one. The granite may have been chosen for status and permanence alone, exactly as the standard account says, and the acoustic and electromagnetic properties measured today may be a byproduct of choosing the hardest, most impressive stone available, rather than evidence of deliberate engineering intent. Ancient builders working with the finest material they had access to would naturally end up with a chamber that happens to resonate and happens to sit inside a pyramid whose geometry happens to focus electromagnetic energy, without ever intending either effect. Coincidence built from ambition rather than design is not a dramatic answer, but it is a real one, and it deserves to sit beside the more startling reading rather than be dismissed to make the mystery bigger than the evidence supports. What keeps the question alive is the chamber beneath the pyramid, the subterranean chamber, cut into bedrock 100 feet below the structure, unfinished, undecorated, and largely unexplored since it was first documented in the 19th century. No modern electromagnetic survey of that lower chamber has been published. No study has measured whether the water table beneath it still produces the pressure conditions the piezoelectric theory requires, or whether it ever did. The chamber sits exactly where the theory says the system's source would need to be, and it remains, more than 2 centuries after its rediscovery, one of the least studied rooms in the most studied building on Earth. The shafts inside the king's chamber have fared slightly better. Robotic cameras sent into the southern shaft in the early 2000s found a small stone door with copper fittings blocking the passage roughly 200 feet in, a discovery that raised as many questions as it answered, and that has never been fully resolved. Copper does not belong in a ventilation shaft. Copper belongs in a circuit. Whether that fitting is ornamental, structural, or something else has never been settled, because the door behind it has never been opened. The Queen's Chamber, one level below the King's Chamber and reached by its own separate passage, has its own pair of shafts, and for most of the pyramid's known history, those shafts were believed to stop short inside the masonry, sealed off and going nowhere. In 1993, the German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robotic crawler named Upuout 2 up the southern shaft of the Queen's Chamber to map it properly for the first time. 65 meters in, the camera stopped at a limestone slab fitted with 2 corroded copper pins, worked into the stone-like handles or terminals, rather than left as raw hardware. No one has ever agreed on what those pins were for. A door does not need metal handles set into its face if it is only meant to stay shut forever, and a shaft does not need to end at a fitted slab if its only purpose is airflow. The slab is still there. It has been drilled through twice since 1993, in small exploratory attempts, and each time the passage behind it simply continues, blocked again a short distance further on by another stone. 3 doors, so far, each one leading only to the next. Then, in 2017, an international team working under the ScanPyramids project used a technique with nothing to do with drilling at all. Cosmic ray particles called muons pass through solid stone constantly, and by placing detector plates inside and around the pyramid, the team could measure where those particles were being absorbed differently than the surrounding masonry predicted. Denser material blocks more muons. Open space blocks fewer. The results, published in the journal Nature, identified a previously unknown void running above the Grand Gallery, at least 30 meters long, with a cross-section comparable to the Grand Gallery itself. The physicists who ran the study were careful in their published language. They confirmed the void exists. They did not claim to know what it was built for, whether it was ever accessible from inside the structure, or whether it connects to any of the shaft systems already documented one level below it. As of now, no drilling, no camera, and no further muon survey has resolved the question either way. The void sits exactly where a structure built around a resonating chamber would benefit from an additional reflective cavity, and it also sits exactly where a construction crew relieving structural load above a gallery this size might reasonably have left one. Both readings fit the same measurement. Neither has been ruled out. What we are left with is a chamber built from stone that behaves like an oscillator, sitting above a water source that could theoretically drive it, inside a geometric shape that independent physics has confirmed concentrates electromagnetic energy at points corresponding to the chamber's own location, with shafts running to the surface at a precision no ventilation system requires, one of them blocked by a stone door with copper fittings that has sat unopened for over 20 years. Every piece of that description is documented. None of it proves the pyramid generated power for any purpose we would recognize. All of it means the tomb explanation, on its own, has never accounted for the room at the center of the structure. The theory says the Great Pyramid was built to draw energy up from the earth and turn it into something usable, a resonating chamber, tuned by stone and water, into a source of power whose purpose has been lost. The evidence says the physical conditions for exactly that kind of system exist inside the pyramid, measured and published, whether or not the ancient builders ever intended them. Between those two statements sits the actual mystery, the one the standard account has never closed and the one no instrument has yet been pointed at directly enough to settle. The copper door in the southern shaft is still there. The water table is still there. The granite is still 55% quartz. And the chamber it was all built around is still empty, still lidless, still humming at a frequency no one built it to have by accident, or so the theory goes, waiting for whoever finally gets the chance to open that door and look. The Grand Gallery itself gets treated as an afterthought in most accounts of the pyramid, a tall corridor that simply connects one chamber to another. Its actual construction does not match that description. The gallery rises nearly 9 meters high, corbelled in 7 overlapping courses of limestone, each course stepping inward slightly further than the one below it, until the ceiling narrows to a channel barely wide enough to walk beneath. Corbelling is a real and well-understood technique for spanning distance without a single supporting beam, and on its own it explains nothing unusual. What is unusual is the row of rectangular sockets cut into the ramps running along both sides of the gallery floor, 27 pairs in total, evenly spaced, empty for as long as anyone has surveyed them. No pharaoh's expedition needed 27 pairs of matched sockets to walk a coffin up a ramp. Sockets at that count and that spacing are the kind of feature you build to hold something repeatable in place, not something moved through once and never again. At the base of the gallery, where it narrows into the passage leading up to the king's chamber, sits a feature almost never discussed outside specialist literature. 3 granite portcullis blocks, stacked in a vertical shaft, designed to slide down and seal the passage completely once whatever needed to pass through had finished passing. Portcullis systems appear elsewhere in pyramid construction, and the standard reading treats them as a security measure, meant to block tomb robbers after the burial was sealed. That reading has one persistent problem. Every portcullis of this type recovered at Giza was found already lowered, blocking the passage exactly as designed, and yet every burial chamber behind one was still found empty of a body when it was finally breached. The mechanism worked. What it was protecting did not survive to be found, or was never there in the form the tomb theory requires. Below the ascending passage, cut into the natural bedrock itself, 3 granite plugs remain wedged into the passage to this day, so tightly fitted that the 9th century excavation crew, working under Caliph al-Ma'mun, could not force them loose, and had to tunnel around them through the surrounding limestone instead, a detour still visible as a rough scar beside the smooth original passage. Those plugs have never been removed in the 12 centuries since. They sit precisely where a system built to isolate the upper chambers from the passage below would need a final permanent seal, tightened once and never meant to open again. None of this proves the resonance theory. A sealing system built to protect a burial explains the plugs and the portcullis blocks just as completely as a sealing system built to isolate an energy chamber would. But a tomb sealed this many times, this deliberately, for a body that was never found inside it, leaves the same question standing that the granite and the shafts already raised. Something in this structure was built to be closed off with a permanence far beyond what any burial required, and 12 centuries after the first attempt to force it open, no one has fully explained what that permanence was protecting. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.